The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Should the Rams go all in on this all-world defensive player if he becomes available?
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast.
The big buzz around the National Football League is that there is a contract dispute in Pittsburgh involving their best player, TJ Watt, and the organization. And after it was made clear by what appeared to be TJ Watt's agent and the Steelers front office, they're just kind of taking jabs at each other in the press while they iron out a new contract. That's kind of how it feels to me before the season starts. And the Steelers have came out and said they have no intention of trading him, and that, look, they might move him in 2026, 2027, potentially after a new deal. But the Steelers are all in on the 2025 season. And if you look at the cost of acquiring someone of TJ Watt's caliber, we were talking about potentially multiple first-round picks, at the very least a one first-round pick. There's no doubt about that. And then you have to look at the fact that you have to pay him, that he would be the highest paid pass rusher in the league. He'd be right there with Myles Garrett. So any team that would be willing to trade for TJ Watt, you'd be getting a guy that is north of 30, getting paid at the top tier, while also having to empty out your draft war chest. So before we kind of get into what the specifics of it mean for Los Angeles Rams, just know that you have to go and pay top dollar. I mean, we're talking about Beverly Hills real estate. We're talking about the top shelf stuff, right? This ain't the cheap stuff, right? This is a very, very high quality elite player that plays a premium position in the National Football League. But just because I've heard a lot of you guys in the comments, D-Mac, let's go get TJ Watt. I've got multiple people on X ask me the same thing. Is it possible? So for you, it's July, early July, before it really gets crazy. I'll just entertain the conversation. And I think that it's relevant because I think it's a good exercise into looking at what the Rams are working with heading into the season. Because when you look at where the Rams are at, they're a team that's in a really good position to address needs. They did get the additional first-round pick for the 2026 draft when they traded that to the Falcons for Pierce. They moved out of the first round. You ended up taking Terrence Ferguson in the second round. So now that war chest has more assets in it that you can flip if you need to go out there and address it. Now, the thing with the TJ Watt situation is, let's just say hypothetically. Let's say hypothetically that the Steelers would seriously do this. And the reason why they would do it is, look, I mean, do the Steelers really want to guarantee him that money in the second, third year of his contract, things like that? And you look at the George Pickens deal. The Steelers weren't trading George Pickens until they ultimately did. Things can change rather quickly in the National Football League. Just talking to some people that cover the Steelers, they told me that it's highly unlikely, right? But it's not like he's Paul Skeens, right, of the Pittsburgh Pirates, right? He's not getting traded no matter what. For TJ Watt, he most likely will not be traded, but things can change quickly in the NFL. But let's just say for a second that there was even any hope of trading for someone like TJ Watt. Would it make sense for the Rams? Well, I think the first thing you have to look at is you look at the player. And the player that he is, he's going to be 31 in October. This is not just a good player. It's not just a great player. This is a Hall of Fame level talent, right? This is someone who sits at that very exclusive table, that VIP table. He's in that VIP club, right? There's dudes there in the All-Pro club. There's dudes that are in the Pro Bowl club. Then there's dudes that are at like the Myles Garrett club, right? I mean, that table where you go into that exclusive Hollywood club and you go inside and then you're in the club, but it's like there's also a velvet rope that gets you to the VIP section where the super famous people go. That's where TJ Watt is as far as his just overall ability when he's right, when he's at his very best. And you look at the age, I've already mentioned he is on the wrong side of 30 at 31, but he did win the NFL Defensive Player of the Year in 2021. He's finished top 5 in voting in 4 of the past 6 seasons, has 7 Pro Bowls. Has 4 All-Pros in his 8 seasons. So, yeah, he's an absolute menace as far as being a disruptor, a game wrecker, 108 career sacks. He led the league in sacks in 2020, 2021, and 2023. He has 126 career tackles for a loss, has 225 quarterback hits. And if you pair that with guys like Jared Verse and Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk, I mean, you could have the most ferocious defensive line with edge rushers in the league. And when you consider that your quarterback position, your secondary spot, if that is your quote-unquote weak spot, one way to address that is getting even better at another area on defense. And then you add the fact that Chris Shula is great at optimizing guys, you could see why it would take this to another level. Now, would you have to include Byron Young in that deal? Would you still have Byron Young? I mean, that's another thing that you have to consider as well. But let's do the cost to get him. I mean, the cost would be pretty astronomical because of a couple things. I mean, the Steelers aren't just going to give him up for a 3rd, 4th, or 5th round pick or anything like that. He's seeking an extremely lucrative extension, so you have to pay him and you have to give him a serious haul. Now, just take a look at recent history for what guys like him have got, or as far as just some comps. I mean, you got guys like Chase Young, Hassan Reddick, Matt Judon, right? They're not at his level, and you've given up a 3rd round pick for guys like that. And then for guys like Montez Sweat and Khalil Mack, 2nd round picks. And then you got Bradley Chubb, a 1st round pick. The Rams, they have some history in acquiring guys that are elite at that position. They gave up a 2nd round pick for Von Miller in 2021. So they kind of know the price of doing business. But then it's not just the draft capital, because you're talking about a 1st round pick at the very least, potentially multiples. And then there's the contract extension. And I don't think that Watt deserves what Myles Garrett got, which is $88.8 million guaranteed, $40 million AAV. But let's just say he's in the Nick Bosa, Max Crosby bucket, where you're at 34 to 36 million, something in that range. That is an extremely high price for a TJ Watt. And if this team feels like he's that last missing piece that could truly get him over the top, and if you win a Super Bowl next year, you don't really care about what that's going to do for the 4 or 5 years after that, because Super Bowls are just incredibly special. They're very hard to win. A lot of franchises that don't even have them. Looking at you, San Diego, and I'm looking at you, LA Chargers. I'm looking at you. I mean, all these franchises around sports, if you can just win one championship, World Series, NBA Finals, Stanley Cup, Super Bowl, it means so much. The Rams already have 2 to their name. You add a 3rd one, and he's a big reason why. Well, you can live with that, especially when you factor in that Devontae Adams and Matthew Stafford. There's no guarantees with guys like that after this year and possibly the next year. So the Rams are in all-in mode, but I do think that they're still going to be cost-conscious, and they're not going to just be reckless with the assets that they do have. So I think when you look at if they should go for it, if it's available as an option, that is kind of how you would justify and how you would talk yourself into it for the Rams.
check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay
49ers training camp rapidly approaching. We're talking defensive backs today.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Croc, your specialty. Quarterbacks can wait. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball, the back end of the defense, the most important group of football players on any football team, right, Croc? Let's start with DBs, and in the safety position, I think gets pretty interesting and where the battles are at each position group. But with cornerback, outside corner specifically, I think we know who the starters are. And I think this is the one position group that things should play out how they're drawn up as long as there's no major injuries here. The battles come after the starting group of players, right? For the 49ers at cornerback, it's Diamador Lenore and Renardo Green on the outside. Diamador Lenore, it's seemingly, Croc, the 49ers have told us by drafting Upton Stout, and we'll get to the nickel position a little bit later. The 49ers are telling us that Diamador Lenore is a pure outside corner from here on out, right?
I think that's what they're telling us. And I like it. And I'm like that they went that way, right? Like maybe not the quote unquote prototype in the sense of height, weight that they kind of were prone to go after, especially in earlier years in this regime's start. But to say, you know what, he's a good corner. He can coverage. He's physical. He's going to tackle. Yes, he's very versatile. And if we need to use him in certain spots, we can do that. But man, that is a starting outside corner. And I think that was one of the better decisions that they can make. Like just committing to him being whatever they need him to be, which more times than not is going to be an outside cornerback.
I think the big question, and I think everyone knows what Diamador Lenore is. I kind of liked him in a nickel role because I think he was so good at it. And I don't love the idea of, okay, he's outside only now. And so now we created a new hole because you didn't really have a hole to fill, and they created a new hole to fill, and they drafted a guy who I think is going to fill that hole in Upton Stout.
Can we talk about that real quick?
So yeah, go ahead.
We're breaking this down, right? Corners, nickels, safeties, because I truly believe that there are three different positions. The nickel position, even though I don't think the fans view it that way. They almost view it kind of like a running back, right? Like where you can kind of plug somebody in. Maybe you don't get Diamador Lenore, or maybe you don't get Christian McCaffrey, right, at running back. Yeah. But it's you can plug somebody in and they'll be good. The nickel, most people say that the cornerback position is the hardest position to play in all of football outside of the quarterback position. And the quarterback, because it's mentally, right? Not
do most people say that, or do just ex-corners say that?
Probably more so ex-corners, but a lot of people, all right, they'll say corner. It's a very difficult position because one false step, one bad step here or there, and it's a touchdown. And the timing of these offenses have gotten so much better, and and then just the physicality of, if you touch a guy, it's a flag, right, or it's illegal contact or something. So it's just an extremely difficult position to play. Nickel is the hardest position to play. So if you do have a guy like Diamador Lenore who can play inside, that there's maybe more, even though they're not paid like it, almost like a tight end. I use running back. Tight end might be a better way of explaining it, right? Because George Kittle is responsible for pass catching, run after catch. He has to beat guys versus man coverage, corners, safeties, linebackers. But also he has to pass protect or run block. He has to block Daniil Hunter coming off the edge and try to pancake these big guys, right? Like that's extremely difficult. Nickel takes on some of the similar challenges, even though they're not paid the same as guys on the outside. So you talk about Diamador Lenore, what he is or what he isn't. And yeah, I like, okay, have him on the outside court, you got your starting corner. But when you say, I might rather have him in the nickel, because I think you get more bang for your buck having him there.
I think everything you said is spot on because the league is starting to tell us this, and pay scales are kind of coming around slowly, and I think there's some ambiguity between positions, and even with safety and nickel and corner, because some nickels are more like safeties, some nickels are more like corners. Some teams play their slot roles a little bit differently, but with more zone coverages, and this has been happening for a while, more cover 3, more cover 4 now, and different, matching and just all the different ways that you can cover on the back end to combat the timing that we're seeing on the offensive side of the ball. I think we're seeing more value for the nickel players because of how often teams are in nickel and because how difficult it is and how often teams are targeting the middle of the field. And then the lack of, like, we don't have shutdown corners anymore, Croc. There's no more islands, right? There's a few really good corners in the NFL, but it just I think what we're seeing is a leveling of the playing field and a little bit more ambiguity with the positions on the defensive side of the ball, and we're even seeing it with linebacker too, because everybody on the back end has to be able to cover. And football's getting a little bit more positionless, which means you're getting less of the shutdown outside corner and getting more value placed on the nickel guys and the interior players.
We were supposed to talk about the outside corners in this segment, but we've kind of flipped it and we started talking about the nickels. So we'll just stick there. One of the more difficult things the 49ers are probably going to ask a player to do this year is be a rookie, come in and play at that nickel spot. You're responsible for, again, coverage. You're responsible for blitzing. You're responsible for run fits. You have to understand and play with the linebackers. What are they doing? How can I help them? How can they help me? Same with the outside guys and the safeties, the guys behind you. Oh, and by the way, if I'm blitzing, I'm not just blitzing off the edge. How does Nick Bosa, what type of pass rush move does he use? Is he outside? Is he slicing inside? Then I come off the edge. If he goes outside, I come inside. So they're probably going to ask a guy who's pegged right now as the starter at the nickel spot, Upton Stout, to be that guy coming in and truly understand all those things. Now, one thing that Upton Stout does have going for himself is he truly played nickel in college. You go back some years, right? Guys like DJ Reed. I just looked at a depth chart from 2020 and looking at the 49ers where they had certain guys. DJ Reed was pegged as a nickel back. All right. He was a corner at Kansas State. He did not play nickel. And the 49ers said, well, you never played nickel, at least not at a high level, collegiate level, corner in junior college, corner at Kansas State. But you know what? We are going to make you play nickel at the NFL level. Now, it can work a little bit, but there could be the hiccups like we saw with Womack, and where he came in and he was a starter and he made some plays. Then 2 weeks into the season, they're like, this is not going to work. So I like the thoughts of Upton Stout being there, a guy that has played there. Womack, outside corner at wherever he went, Toledo, I think it was. Right? Yeah. He was an outside corner. The one thing I do like, if they do go this route with Upton Stout, he is a nickel. It is like he looks like a nickel. He moves like a nickel. He has the physicality that you want your nickels to have. And he has the experience of truly playing the position as opposed to moving to it at the NFL level because he's not as long as the NFL guys would like. So I'm curious to see how it goes because it's a lot different at the NFL level. College, a lot of spread offenses. You got the air raid, you got all that. NFL, ground and pound. They're going to be asking you to do a lot of different things. You're playing a higher percentage of man coverage as opposed to what you see typically at most colleges across the nation. I think it's just a little bit more challenging to make that switch. And the 49ers felt like maybe Upton Stout is the guy that can help them do that right now.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups all summer long, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions, fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out. It makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Kansas City Chiefs running back room is lacking a little bit of pop.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
We're talking about the running backs, how this is going to play into Kansas City as they prepare for training camp, which is a little over 2 weeks away. We're going to talk about the run for the roster a little bit later. We're going to talk about the Chiefs running back core contributors in the next segment, but we're going to start today with talking about Isaiah Pacheco and how he headlines a running back room that has a little bit of questions. But before we get there, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. All right. This is a positional group that I think maybe a month or two ago I was feeling pretty good about, but the longer it's stayed the way it is, the less I feel good about it at this point. I hate saying that because I still think that Pacheco has the ability to be effective in this offense, and I like what Kareem Hunt can bring, but it still doesn't seem to have a home run hitter, and I think that could be a problem.
I think there's potential for a home run hitter, and we can definitely talk about that. But I will say this, as far as like a leader, it's Pacheco. He is the top back. He's going to be given all the room that he needs to take that role and literally run with it as best as he can. And that's, I think, a good thing. Everything else after that, I understand how the lack of changes or additions can maybe kind of leave you feeling a little bit iffy, but in the end, they're going to run him until he doesn't run anymore. If he gets injured, obviously they'll trade him out, whatever, but that's really the plan. I don't think that's changed.
I agree, but that's kind of the problem because he's been injured just about every single year. Granted, he hasn't been injured and missed time in a couple of years, but he's been injured and had to have surgery after the season. And he got injured and was out for multiple games last year. And my issue is you have a guy that played really well on Kareem Hunt as your backup who can step in and could be a short yardage guy and a goal line guy. And you have Elijah Mitchell who could be a home run guy, but also has an injury history. So you have issues there. And the question is, do you look outside the room currently and try to bring somebody else in?
Eventually you do. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's more on cut down day, maybe a couple days before that than it is now. I don't think you need to be scrambling before training camp to go get another running back body because you don't know. Is Elijah Mitchell like to the point where he understands this is kind of his last hurrah? Does that mean that he's trained up and he's in better shape, so maybe he can avoid some of the injuries he's had in the past? That would certainly help. Talking heads around the nation want to put Rashard Smith into this like third down back role, like he's going to walk in and take it. Like I'm just like, you all got to relax a little bit. He is an option though, and so that's a plus as well. Would they add to it? Do they want to carry 4, including a fullback, or do they want to carry 4 total? 4 running backs themselves, and maybe you keep the fullback, whatever they decide, right? I think that comes into the competition that we have to see the first couple of weeks in camp, specifically once the pads come on and somebody gets hit. First game or 2 of the preseason, see who survives, because you're absolutely right. There is a lot of injury history here. But I do like the fact that with Pop's back in full, you're not trying to make Kareem into something he's not. He's not a 1,000-yard back. No, he is a spot duty backup with a lot of goal line potential. And then that's catching the ball as well.
Yeah, and I think that he can fulfill his role great. And I think, when we talk about core contributors, we're going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to Kareem Hunt and Elijah Mitchell and maybe even Rashard Smith. I guess I'm looking at it from the aspect of, could they go out and could they find somebody that could step in and maybe be a change of pace that they don't really have on the roster right now, that also could possibly be a special teamer that could help them with kickoffs and punt returns, because that could play into who makes the roster. And when you talk about Rashard Smith, him making the roster is probably more contingent on his time as a returner than it is as a running back.
I think you're probably right. And folks, this is a special edition live show as we go through here. And there's a lot of things coming in the next week, but we want to give you some of these every now and then. So thanks for Britt for making his comment. And you guys are welcome to throw them in the chat, and we'll try to bring those up when you get there. And Pops does deserve carries. I completely agree. I will say the other thing, though, when it does come down to that, the couple of practices after the second preseason game, that's when you're going to know whether they feel they have to go out and get more talent.
Yeah.
And they'll be sweeping the pro film to see who might come available.
And the other thing that actually plays into this, and I know we're talking running backs, but it plays into the entire roster. They have a Trey Smith deadline next week, basically a week from today. And if they don't get him signed, good luck being able to bring somebody else in, because the cost is going to be prohibitive, more than likely, if they want to go out and get a running back to kind of help out right now. We're on Trey Smith watch. I haven't seen any real updates. It seems pretty quiet, which sometimes can be a good deal.
It means they're not trying to make a statement in the media and the press. So that, I think, in essentially is a good thing. Let's hope that it also means that they're making progress. That is the question mark.
Yeah, it's definitely the question mark. And if you missed it last week, I gave you a guess as to what I thought the contract could be for Trey Smith on last Thursday. And we'll see whether or not I get it right if they end up getting him extended. But that could lead into whether or not Kansas City could add a running back. Core contributors at the running back position include several guys that have been here for a couple of years, that were here last year. And another one that was added in the offseason, Elijah Mitchell is the guy that was added in the offseason. Obviously, Brashard Smith is maybe a guy that we'll talk about, I think, really in the run for the roster. But when you start looking at Kareem Hunt, he's going to be here. He's going to be basically your third down back, a pass catching back out of the backfield, and also more than likely your goal line guy. And then you have a question, and this is the one where I don't know where to put him. I would say he's in run for the roster, and I think you're going to hate that, but I don't know that Carson Steele makes this section right now.
He does.
Okay, I disagree.
People see, I know, I hear
fine.
where you're coming from, because you look at it and it's like, okay, how can they really keep 5? And that's a legitimate question. But every time we did this with Sherm, right, where it's like, I don't know, they don't use him enough. Is it really justified? Is special teams enough to keep him? And he ends up keeping a fullback. And so, like,
Yep.
I'm relying on history to kind of foreshadow the fact that I think Andy wants a true fullback on the roster to go to if he has to, and to just be a core special teams player if he needs to in the meantime. So I'm still leaning towards Carson Steele has a spot on this roster.
Well, we will see. I think the biggest difference between now and then is the depth at the offensive line position, which we'll talk about in another episode. But I think that could really play into how this is going to play out, because it's not just offensive line, it's defensive line. And you're more than likely keeping, I would say, 19 to 20 guys at those two positional groups alone. And that's going to hamper where you can keep other players.
Keeping other players is a delicate balance, and I think it's more difficult this season than most. With this running back room, with like you said, a third down back, definitely a goal line back. And I think, honestly, it's sometimes to spell Pacheco. I think Hunt has a bigger role. They were force feeding him all those carries and yards up front. I thought he hit the wall pretty hard. Guy his age coming off the couch totally makes sense. And thank you, Britt. We appreciate you. I think this year, having had the time to train, knowing that he's back in a read system, having OTAs that, I mean, you heard Jerry Tillery talk about like the pace of practice, even at OTA level, which is all he's experienced to this point, is still a step above. So it makes me feel like Hunt should be able to come in and take 10 carries a game and be a true committee back, be a true number 2 to do it.
Let me ask you a question on that in that regard. Do you think that him not practicing at all, him not having training camp last year, affected how well he was able to have staying power late in the season? And him having training camp and having OTAs and having all that, getting ready for the season, will allow him to be able to be more effective on a longer time frame for the Chiefs this year.
I think it's a combination. I do think missing camp in the beginning of the season definitely had a detrimental effect on his ability to persevere through the season, right? I think part of the hey, he hit the wall a little bit earlier than we thought was part of that. I do think having preparation time this year should elongate that, but I also think that they need to manage his snaps, limit them a little bit to be a true number 2. I think he'll get some first down carries. He'll get some second down carries, but it will be in relief of Pops in order to keep Pacheco healthy as well, right? So I think it's all a balance. And I think both those things could lead to him being more effective on a limited role later into the season, if not the playoffs.
And you start looking at this room, and we've already talked about Carson Steele, and we disagree where we think he should be on this list. But regardless, if he makes the roster, he's going to probably be a guy that's making it because of special teams, not just because he plays fullback. That is definitely something that needs to be taken into account. And it's also possible he could be a kick returner. He did it last year. That also could play into him making the roster.